The bullet wasn't meant for the little girl. Hazel knew that the moment she heard the shot. A single crack cutting through the noise of the fundraiser gala, sharp and wrong, like a bone snapping in the middle of a crowd. She was carrying a tray of champagne flutes when it happened. Crystal glasses, the expensive kind, the kind she was terrified of dropping every single time she walked through that ballroom. She dropped them anyway, not because of the sound, because of where the little girl was standing. Cora Aldridge, 4 years old, dark curls, a white dress her father had probably spent more on than Hazel made in a month, was standing exactly 3 feet ahead, frozen in place near the edge of the main table. The man who fired the shot had come from the service corridor. Hazel had seen him pass through earlier, dressed like the rest of the catering staff, badge clipped to his lapel, eyes moving too fast, scanning instead of serving. She had noticed it and told herself she was being paranoid. People looked nervous at these events. She looked nervous at these events. It meant nothing. It meant everything. She didn't think. That's the part she could never fully explain afterward, not to the paramedics, not to the police, not to herself lying awake at 3 a.m. in the weeks that followed. There was no calculation, no brave decision, no moment of heroism she could point to and say, this is when I chose it. 1 second she was holding the tray. The next she was moving, and the tray was gone, and Cora was behind her, and the second shot hit Hazel in the left shoulder and spun her sideways, and the third caught her in the side, low and burning. And she went down with her arms still wrapped around the little girl. She remembered the sound of screaming. She remembered the cold floor against her cheek. She remembered Cora's voice saying, lady, 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 over and over, very quietly, into the side of her neck. She didn't remember much after that. Hazel Marsh was 27 years old and worked 3 jobs, none of which she was proud of and all of which she needed. Days were at the dry cleaners on Elm, 6 hours of steam and static and other people's silk blouses. 2 evenings a week she tutored freshman math at a community center that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. And on weekends, the weekends she'd taken this particular gig from, she picked up catering shifts through a staffing agency that sent her to events she could never have attended as a guest. She had a younger brother named Ray. He was 16 and lived with their aunt, because their mother had left when Hazel was 19, and Ray was 8, and nobody talked about it anymore. Hazel sent money when she had it. She called every Sunday. She kept the spare bedroom in her 1-bedroom apartment technically empty in case Ray ever needed somewhere to go, even though empty rooms cost the same as furnished ones, and she couldn't really afford it. She was not the kind of person who expected things to change. She was the kind of person who got through the week. She woke up in a hospital room. That part came back in pieces, ceiling tiles, the hiss of a machine near her head, a heaviness in her left side that wasn't quite pain, just an absence of normal sensation, like her body had decided to file that information under later. There was a window, afternoon light. She tried to sit up and immediately understood there was a mistake. Don't, the voice came from the corner. A man she had never spoken to directly, though she knew who he was. Everyone in the room had known who he was. Nathaniel Aldridge was standing near the window with his jacket off, and his sleeves rolled to the elbows and the particular expression of someone who had been awake for a very long time, and was managing it through sheer force of refusal. He was in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered, with dark hair gone slightly unkempt, and she had seen him earlier in the evening from across the ballroom and thought, as much as she'd thought anything while carrying trays and trying not to spill, that he looked like a man who was used to being the most dangerous thing in a room. She had not been wrong about that. "You've been out for 11 hours, he said. He didn't move from the window. The surgery took 6. You lost a significant amount of blood. The doctor says both wounds are serious but not fatal, assuming you don't do something stupid like trying to sit up." Hazel lay back down. "Where's Cora?" she asked. Her voice came out wrong, dry and scraped and not quite hers. Something shifted in his face. It was small and fast, gone almost before she saw it. "She's fine. She wasn't hit." He paused. "Because of you." Hazel closed her eyes. The machine near her head kept hissing. "My name is Nathaniel Aldridge," he said, as though she hadn't been working his family's gala and wearing a name tag that said the agency name and not hers. "Cora is my daughter. She's 4. "I know," Hazel said without opening her eyes. "I saw her earlier. She spilled a glass of water on herself and cried about it." A silence. "She told me," he said. "She told me the lady helped her dry her dress." Hazel had found a folded cloth napkin and dabbed at the front of Cora's dress, while the little girl sniffled and explained, with great seriousness, that it was her best dress. Hazel had told her it looked perfect. She hadn't thought anything of it. "The man who fired the shots," Nathaniel said, and his voice changed, not louder but different, with an edge like something being unsheathed. "He's dead. My people got to him before the police. The shooter was contracted, hired. By someone who wanted to send me a message through my daughter. Hazel opened her eyes. Someone tried to kill a 4-year-old to send you a message. Yes. What kind of business are you in? The kind where this happens. She understood then the full shape of what she'd walked into. Not just a wealthy man's fundraiser, not just catering work. She was lying in a private hospital room, not a ward, not a curtained bay, a room, with real furniture and actual art on the walls. Because the man standing at the window was not simply a businessman with a lot of money. He was something else, something with people who could reach a shooter before police could, something with enemies willing to use a child as a message. She should have been terrified. She was mostly just tired. You have a police detail outside, she said. I have my detail outside, he corrected. The police were here. I sent them away. You can do that? For now. He moved away from the window, pulled a chair close to the side of the bed, and sat down up close. He looked older than she'd registered from across the ballroom. There were lines around his eyes that weren't from smiling. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly. Okay, Hazel said. The man who hired the shooter, whoever he is, he doesn't know if the attempt was successful. He knows Cora survived. What he doesn't know is whether there were witnesses who could identify his man. He paused. You were standing close enough to have seen the shooter clearly in good light before the chaos started. Hazel thought about the man with the badge and the fast eyes. She had seen him. She had seen his face. You're telling me I'm in danger, she said. I'm telling you the people I'm dealing with will assume you are a liability. Until I find who ordered this and remove the problem, you are not safe. He held her gaze, not flinching, not softening it. Honest, in the way that people who operate in dishonest worlds sometimes are, because they've given up pretending. I can protect you. I can bring you somewhere safe with security until this is resolved. Or I can give you resources to disappear on your own and take your chances. He paused again. But I need you to understand that the first option is what I'm strongly recommending. Hazel stared at the ceiling. She had a shift at the dry cleaners Monday morning. She had a tutoring session Tuesday night. She had a brother who called her on Sundays and a landlord who emailed about the water bill, and a life that was small and difficult and completely, entirely hers. How long? She said. I don't know, a few weeks, maybe less. She closed her eyes again. Every breath pulled at something in her side. She'd been shot twice for a child she didn't know, and the man whose child it was now sitting next to her hospital bed, asking her to trust him with her safety. Fine, she said. They moved her 3 days later when the doctors cleared her for transport into the back of an unmarked vehicle with tinted windows and 2 of Nathaniel's men in the front seat who didn't speak or offer their names. She had asked someone to contact her agency, her landlord and her aunt. The last one indirectly, so that Ray would know she was okay without knowing any details that could put him at risk. She had not been told where she was going. Where she was going turned out to be a house in the hills north of the city, behind a gate and set back from a road that wasn't on any map she'd looked at on her phone. It was large in the way that money makes things large, not ostentatious, just quietly excessive, the kind of house that had more rooms than reasons and more staff than guests. She was given a room on the 2nd floor with its own bathroom and a view of trees that went on further than she could see. Cora was there. She came running down the hall the morning after Hazel arrived, still in pajamas with a stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, and stopped about 4 feet away and stared. You're the lady, Cora said. I'm the lady, Hazel agreed. Daddy says you got hurt. I did. Cora considered this with the gravity that 4-year-olds bring to important information. I have a rabbit, she said finally, holding it up. His name is Bernard. He got hurt once too. I fixed him with tape. That's very resourceful, Hazel said. Cora nodded, like this was agreed upon. Then she took 3 steps forward, tucked herself against Hazel's side. Carefully, on the right side, away from the injury which made Hazel wonder if someone had told her, and held Bernard up for inspection. Hazel looked at the rabbit. He looks fully recovered, she said. He is, Cora said, with satisfaction. Nathaniel was not, in any conventional sense, easy to talk to. He was present in the house, but not available. Moving through it on schedules she didn't understand, taking calls in rooms whose doors stayed closed, emerging at meals and then retreating again. He asked about her health every morning with the same efficiency he probably brought to operational reports, and she answered with the same brevity because she was not accustomed to being asked and didn't know how to expand it. She learned things in pieces. His wife, Cora's mother, had died 2 years ago. A car accident, Hazel was told by one of the household staff, a woman named Mrs. Ochoa, who ran the house with the calm precision of someone who had survived many difficult years and intended to survive many more. Mrs. Ochoa told her this not as gossip but as context, the way you brief someone on a situation so they don't stumble into it wrong. He had not been the same since, Mrs. Ochoa said, and left it there. Cora, for her part, didn't seem unhappy. She was the kind of child who creates her own weather, loud when she wanted to be, focused when something caught her interest, utterly indifferent to atmospheres that adults agonized over. She had decided Hazel was interesting and pursued this conclusion with the relentless logic of a 4-year-old who has decided something is true. Every morning she appeared. Every morning, Hazel made room. On the 5th day, Hazel was sitting in the sunroom reading. She'd asked for books. They'd produced books, an entire rolling cart of them, which she was still recovering from as an experience, when Nathaniel appeared in the doorway. "How's the shoulder?" he asked. "Better than yesterday. Still not great." He came into the room and didn't sit immediately, the way he often moved into spaces slightly before he committed to them. "The doctor is coming Thursday to check the side wound." "Okay." He sat down across from her. "I need to tell you where the investigation is, as of this morning." She put the book down. "We've confirmed the shooter was contracted through a broker who works out of the Northeast. The broker has been located." He gave us a name before he stopped being cooperative. A pause that was very deliberately neutral. "The name is a man named Gregor Szymanski. He runs a distribution operation that overlaps with one of my supply chains. We had a dispute 6 months ago. I thought it was resolved." "He tried to kill your daughter over a business dispute," Hazel said. "People do extraordinary things when they feel cornered. Has he been cornered?" Nathaniel looked at her in a way she was beginning to recognize, like she had said something that landed differently than expected. "He's been made aware that I know," he said. "He'll run or he'll come at me harder. My people are monitoring both possibilities. And until I know which, you stay here." He paused. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't." "It's fine," she said. "The books are good." He was quiet for a moment. "You're very calm about all of this." Hazel looked at him. "I work 3 jobs to make rent in a 1-bedroom apartment, and I send money to my brother who lives with my aunt because my mother left when he was 8 years old. I have been managing things that were outside my control for a long time, Mr. Aldridge. This is a nicer room than I'm used to." He didn't say anything for a beat. "Nathaniel," he said, "you were shot twice for my daughter. You can call me Nathaniel." She looked back at her book. "Okay, Nathaniel." He stayed for another 20 minutes. They talked about the book she was reading. He had read it. He had opinions about it that were sharper and more specific than she'd expected, and she argued with 2 of them. And he listened in the way that people listen when they aren't used to being disagreed with, but find they don't actually mind it. When he left, Mrs. Ochoa appeared in the doorway with a look on her face that communicated nothing overtly and everything by implication. "Tea?" she said. "Please," Hazel said. The call from Ray came on Sunday, routed through a secure line they'd set up for her. He was fine, he said. He was doing okay in school. He'd heard she was in the hospital, but their aunt had told him she was recovering, and it wasn't serious, and he had believed it, mostly, because the alternative was something he didn't want to think about. "Are you safe?" he asked. He was 16 and trying to sound like it didn't matter to him, which meant it mattered enormously. "I promise. I'll explain everything when I can." "Are you somewhere nice at least?" She looked out the window at the trees. "Yeah," she said. "Actually, yes." She could hear him processing that. "Okay," he said. "Good. That's okay." She stayed on the call for 40 minutes. Long after they'd run out of things to say, they stayed on the line. The comfortable silence of people who know each other well enough to not need words to be present. The threat came from inside. She didn't know it at first. She wasn't supposed to know. It was handled on a level she had no access to, in rooms she was never invited into, by people whose names she never learned. But she was moving through the house on a Tuesday evening, restless from the 2nd week of recovery, going slow down the back corridor toward the kitchen for water, when she heard 2 of Nathaniel's men talking in the room off the hall. She wasn't eavesdropping, she was walking. But the door was open and the words were clear, and one of the names she heard made her stop. Szymanski, and then Access, and then Thursday, and then the name of a man she had seen twice, once at the front gate, once near Nathaniel's study, and understood, with a cold clarity that settled into her chest and didn't move, that whoever was talking was not loyal. She stood in the corridor for a long moment. Then she turned around and went back the way she came and found Mrs. Ochoa, and through Mrs. Ochoa reached one of the senior men she had been told to trust, and she told him exactly what she'd heard. The rest of that night she spent in her room with Cora asleep on the other half of her bed. Cora had climbed in at some point during a movie they'd been watching and simply stayed, listening to sounds in the house that were not normal and that she could not quite identify, and that eventually resolved, around 2 in the morning, into silence. Nathaniel came to her door at 2:15. He looked like he had been through something. His shirt had been changed. His knuckles, she noticed, were careful and still at his sides. He said, Who was providing Szymanski with access to our schedule and our security rotations? He won't be doing that anymore. Cora is asleep. He glanced past her into the room and saw Cora curled up with Bernard, completely undisturbed by the last several hours of the world. His expression did something she had no name for. She's fine. Good, Hazel said. Hazel. He said her name differently than he usually said it, or maybe he usually said it the same way and she was only now hearing it. What you did tonight, telling my people what you heard, you did not have to do that. I know. You could have stayed in your room. It wasn't your fight. She looked at him steadily. A 4-year-old is asleep on my bed with a rabbit named Bernard. It's been my fight for 2 weeks. He was quiet. Something in his face had come loose from whatever he usually kept it held in place with. It made him look younger and less armored and much harder to look away from. I told you, he said finally, that you were being protected here. You did. I meant it. I know you did. He stood in the doorway a moment longer. I'll have someone outside your door tonight, Nathaniel. He looked at her. I'm okay, she said. Go handle whatever you need to handle. I'll be here in the morning. Something crossed his face, and then he nodded, and he went, and Hazel closed the door quietly and stood with her back to it in the dark and tried to sort through the feeling that was sitting in her chest, not fear exactly, not relief exactly, but something that had mass and weight and didn't move when she breathed. She went back to bed. She listened to Cora breathe. She didn't sleep for a long time. Szymanski was taken 11 days later. She only knew because Nathaniel told her at breakfast, with Cora between them eating cereal with the focused satisfaction she brought to all food, and his voice was level and quiet, and he didn't explain what taken meant, and she didn't ask. It's over, he said. Okay, she said. They sat with that for a moment. You don't have to leave immediately, he said. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his coffee. There's no reason to rush until you've had more time to recover. Hazel looked at him. She looked at Cora, who was making Bernard inspect her cereal before every bite as a quality control measure. She looked at the window and the trees and the morning light on the kitchen table. Nathaniel, she said. Yes, you're not very good at saying what you mean. He looked up then and caught her looking at him, and for a moment neither of them moved. No, he said after a moment. I'm not. I'll stay, she said, for a bit longer if that works. Something happened in his eyes, not a smile, not quite. Something quieter and more like relief, and something she thought, with a feeling she didn't examine too carefully, that she hadn't expected to find there. It works, he said. Cora looked up from her cereal. Bernard says you should stay, she announced. I told him to ask. Hazel looked, who was propped against the sugar bowl, button eyes aimed in her direction. Tell Bernard thank you, she said. I'll stay. She called Ray on Sunday, like she always did. He asked if she was still somewhere nice. She looked out the window at the trees, at the morning light, at Cora chasing something in the garden below that appeared to be a leaf, with the absolute conviction of a child for whom this was the most important task in the world. Yeah, Hazel said. Still somewhere nice. He made a sound like he was smiling without meaning to admit it. She stayed on the call for a long time. Long after there was anything left to say. Just the quiet on the line, comfortable, like something that had found its shape at last and settled.